Hi there, good afternoon, everybody. Name's Mohammed Dhalech, and I'm going to talk about Black and minority ethnic communities, people of colour engagement in the outdoors, and also focus on a couple of pieces of work. One is I last year visited Canada and America to look at how they're engaging with their communities to get them into the outdoors, and also some of the work that's been done in the UK, particularly the landscapes review that was published in September 2019. So one is how communities engage, but also looking at challenges, disproportionality, racism, discrimination, and underrepresentation in the outdoor sector. I just want to sort of talk about this slide really. The guy in the picture at the front in the soldier's uniform is the ranger in Yosemite National Park, a guy called Shelton Johnson, one of the first black rangers in some of the American national parks, and he's doing a performance about buffalo soldiers. Now, if I talk to you about buffalo soldiers, you'd probably think about Bob Marley's song "Buffalo Soldiers," but he's talking about the buffalo soldiers, African American soldiers in the late 1800s, who actually were the first guardians of Yosemite National Park, who actually guarded and protected the national park and were seen as the first rangers. So it's also about looking at the history of the outdoors as they're connected to communities of colour. Coming back to the UK, the landscape review Julian Glover conducted on behalf of DEFRA last year. And the conclusions he made in his report was the way we protect and improve our landscape needs to change radically. And particularly if we want to protect the natural beauty to be in a better condition 70 years from today and far more biodiverse and alive, then all people from all backgrounds and parts of the country need to be involved in this protection. Because what's been found is communities are not engaging. And what he described as the club, that what we recognize, and this is sort of been there, I've been involved in the outdoors for 20 or 30 years, what we recognize as diversity as the mark of a healthy, resilient society. However, many landscape bodies, so he's talking about national parks, area of natural beauties, countryside parks, nature reserves, have not moved smartly enough to reflect the changing society. So we may have a population of sort of 15, 20% of people from Black and minority ethnic communities, but some of the boards that are running these organizations have less than 1% from Black and minority ethnic communities. And these are national parks. So we are all paying as taxes for these national landscapes through our taxes, yet sometimes on visits, it was felt as if national parks are exclusively mainly white, mainly middle-class clubs with rules only members understand. And much too little is done to actually encourage visitors coming for the first time. And also, what he sort of highlighted was the way we visit and use the countryside is changing. We're having mass all-night walks for charities. A lot of the Three Peaks events are happening over 24 hours. People are going out doing light trails at night, volunteering, walks for charities, mountain biking, music festivals, scuba diving, glamping, arts trails, cycle racing, and more. But we also know that a lot of large parts of society that have no relationship with them at all. And there's a huge difference in terms of people who are excluded and people who enjoy them, and how that actually works. And going to statistics, it clearly shows that those who are disconnected from the countryside, most visits are made by the same better off, less diverse communities. People repeatedly, and those who miss out are the older and young, and especially adolescents, and those from lower socioeconomic and Black and Asian ethnic minority communities. Children are spending less time in the outdoors, far lower than other communities. 20% fewer black and minority children go out into the green spaces weekly compared to white middle-class children. These are statistics published nationally by Natural England through their monitoring engagement in the Natural Environment Survey. And I think it's about how different communities are using the national parks. One of the things that came through from my visit in Canada and also America was how they're using urban parks. So one of the things that they're doing, both in Toronto and in San Francisco, we're finding sort of part of the national park system, there are parks in the urban areas where they're allowing local communities to engage with, and then slowly developing and progressing into going into more wilder open places. So if I look at San Francisco, there's a whole range of national parks sites within San Francisco, and then slowly those communities are then encouraged to go into the outskirts and to places like Yosemite to actually use the outdoors in those areas. So it's about that sort of progression and using local parks. And one of the things we have is areas of outstanding natural beauties in this country, but also nature reserves and local parks. And it's how do we engage local communities to use those parks to actually go out and exercise. Particularly at the moment, clearly with lockdown, we're being encouraged to go to local parks. And there's a lot of groups and communities trying to find routes that people can use locally from their doorstep, accessing green spaces nearby you, rather than driving further away to access those green spaces. And it sort of comes to the fact that communities in modern Britain feel that these landscapes, the countryside, hold no relevance to them. And the countryside is seen as by both black BAME communities and also white communities as very much a white environment. And if that's true today, one of the worries that comes through is what happens in the future. Because if they're not engaged now, then how will they engage going into the future and protect the countryside? Otherwise, it will become irrelevant to them. Similarly, the experiences people are having where they're being stared at or comments made or being excluded from those sort of activities is sort of allowing people not to sort of connect with those areas. One of the things that's going on is how do we engage urban communities? So the picture on the left you see is a group of people from Manchester and Bradford area who came on a basic skills weekend about going out and how do you use the outdoors. So again, it's about trying to understand some of those rules. So when they do come out, whether it's with their families or with their friends, they know and understand some of the rules that are actually in those sort of environments of what to do, what not to do, but also how to navigate those areas safely. Particularly somewhere like this picture was taken in the Lake District, where the group here are actually learning how to use map and compass and how to navigate and how to find things from map to the land. So it's about sort of developing those skills to then for them to enjoy those local and national parks on their own. Just talking about this picture again, this is in Toronto, and it's interesting because this was taken literally near to a main road, main sort of motorway, highway, going to the outskirts of Toronto, easily accessible by lots of people in the local community. Just sort of 5 minutes walk away, there are large blocks of flat where predominantly the migrant communities live. So again, they can access this, but a lot of people don't even access these local resources that are there on their doorstep. And looking at what's around them to actually enjoy that local area. And the woman in the middle, Jacqueline, she actually has developed a tour around the area, looking at the Black history. So again, in this country, that there's a lot of history within the national parks and the countryside areas. If you look at the Peak District or the Lake District, Cumbria, where I live, Cumbria, a lot of the old mansions and houses, country houses, are built on the slave trade. Whitehaven was a huge area in terms of slave trade. There are cemeteries and gravestones going back to the early 1800s where slaves had died in the local area. So there is that whole history. And again, it was 3 AD that the first African soldiers were based in Cumbria, who protected the border between Scotland and England. So again, there's that history of the first Black community in those sort of areas of countryside. And it's about how do you connect those communities to those local locations and historical locations. So in terms of trying to sort of conclude, we need to sort of look at, are the outdoors, a countryside and related organizations are seen as white spaces and exclusive clubs? And also, are we looking at traditional uses versus non-traditional uses for the outdoors? One of the things I see when I'm going around the Lake District and other areas is I do see a lot of people coming out now, but they're using those outdoor spaces. So they might not go for a long walk. They will sit by the lake and have a picnic, have a barbecue, and they're using and enjoying the outdoors in their own way as a community and as an extended family. But then there's also barriers placed. For example, and this is where it comes to institutional systematic racism and unconscious bias. Particularly communities, BAME communities, they tend to want to go out in large extended families. So what they're looking at is when they get there, there's picnic benches for 4 or 5 people. So the structural infrastructure is based around nuclear families, where they expect 2.2 to go out and enjoy a day out in the country. Whereas an extended family, I've seen this in the lakes, where I've seen a whole large extended family come all dressed up for a picnic. Now they would have to sort of sit on the floor, not the benches, because there is no benches available for them. So it's looking at that in terms of how those organizations are actually addressing some of those cultural barriers, institutional barriers, unconscious barriers within there. And why are we not talking about race and racism within those environments? The national parks, the AONBs, they need to have that conversation about how do we engage with those different communities. For example, the Yorkshire Dales National Park have a very good initiative where they actually have a Dales bus, where they run it from Leeds, Bradford, and take them into the Yorkshire Dales so they can spend a day and then take them back for a small price. But that allows easy access for transport to those areas. And also, particularly Yorkshire Dales is very close from Bradford and Leeds, is within half an hour. So how do they access those areas very quickly and easily? And it's about facilitating those sort of opportunities where they may not have access to transport, to cars that they can travel. And also wide implications for the future. When you look at some of these organizations, what we find is a large proportion of these organizations, we've already highlighted they're white and middle class, but they're also very old. A large number are over 65, 70. That includes people who are sitting on boards, people who are volunteers. And therefore, one of the things when you look at the future is when those people are no longer with us, who are going to be looking after our parks and our natural environments? So again, it's about sort of, if you don't engage those communities now, they won't be engaged in the future. And this is again where the American model, they've really put a focus on engaging those communities because they know that they will need those communities in the future to look after their parks. So really what we need is a need for conversations on race and organizational cultural change, because there's no point having a tokenistic approach to say we need more volunteers if the organization at the top isn't changed and committed to this work either, because all you'll have is people coming and leaving because they can see that the organization is not committed to engaging them or taking them forward up the organization into leadership positions. So Mosaic Outdoors is an organization that works and engages with various sort of national parks and so on, but also with communities, particularly offering capacity building and training. Because what we want to do is train communities so they're self-sufficient to go out themselves and they're not reliant on other organizations to try and facilitate that. So what we're trying is build capacity in individual community leaders, in individual members, so they can then have their own groups. And one of the things we are seeing is lots of people are now going out and enjoying the outdoors on their own as a leisure experience. And thank you.